Hi guys, my name's Beth and I am an admin over at Aurora Designs. And I just wanted to show you guys how I cut out panels. Aurora Designs prints in-house panels on double brush poly, and it is something that we're kind of becoming known for, and Brandy does a phenomenal job with that. And so I thought I would show you guys how I use my panel and some of the things I do when I am working with my panel and cutting it out. So let me start with, I'm using the in-house panel 0 Foxes Given, and I am actually using the full adult size. I'm cutting out a man's t-shirt. Now this adult size panel, I'm going to stand up here, is huge, okay? Here's my shoulders, there's the bottom of the panel. It's a big panel, it's not little. I would use this panel for the front of a, like if I was doing a short kind of summery style dress, if I was doing a great big hoodie, if I was doing a long curved tunic. I am a medium small size ready to wear shirt. So most of the time medium, sometimes I go small. And you know, folded in half, you can kind of see. I can lay it out and make a shirt out of it, but the graphic on this is going to be rather large. But I still really like adult panels. You can also use them for leggings, all sorts of things. And of course, if I was doing a man's shirt, I'm going to grab an adult panel. Men have generally a wider chest area. You will run into the smaller guy who can use the standard panel. But most of the time, if you're doing a medium or a large shirt or extra large shirt in man's size, you are going to want to go up to that full-on adult size panel. Otherwise, you can use a standard panel. I do have a standard panel to show you, just so you can kind of get an idea of the two different panel sizes. This is a standard panel. This is our Ellie. She is absolutely gorgeous. Let me see if I can get her kind of up to the camera a little bit more. She's got tons of detail. This was the in-house print on double brush poly, but you can also have it printed on cotton lycra as a base. And there's a beautiful yardage print that's coming out with this on pre-order right now, and it ends in October, the end of October here, actually, on the 31st. So if you lay this panel out on me, you can kind of see this panel would be perfect for a t-shirt that's going to just have a regular straight hem, no curved hem. I wouldn't use this for a curved hem. It's not going to be long enough layout wise. And it would be great for, you know, tank top, t-shirt, anything banded. I mean, you might be able to get a curved hem out of that, but it would be a very short curved hem. So if I'm going to try and do anything like, if I'm making a shirt to cover my leggings, I'm probably going to go with the adult, or I'm going to band this one with a thicker band. So that's kind of that. The other thing, the standard, and this is the standard size panel, the other thing the standard size panel can be really good for is usually anywhere from 8, kind of child size 8, it's kind of pushing it a little bit. I would do child size 8 or maybe a 10, 12 for sure. You want to be in a standard size all the way up through a large woman's adult shirt. So there's panels, and that's just a little bit about them. On size, on those two sizes, we offer babies and a child size as well. So here is the panel that I'm using. It's laid out right now on the table. I did a lot of petting laying it out, so I don't want to unlay it. But I'm going to talk about how I laid it out. So first thing I did was I cut off this selvage edge. Okay, take this selvage edge off. The reason you want to do this is because the selvage edge will pull your fabric and it will make laying your panel out a nightmare. So just cut off that little tiny selvage edge that runs there. You'll see it. It's got a bunch of little dots. It's kind of a different texture than the other. Just cut that off slightly, you know, lay your panel out first and make sure you don't need the tip of that selvage edge, but most people don't. So just cut right along the edge, take it off. It's a whole lot easier to lay out your panel in the long run with that selvage edge off. So if you do that, you're gonna have a nicer layout. The next thing I do, so this panel has eyes. So what I did when I was cutting this panel out is I put my finger down on the eyeball, I put my finger down on the tip of this, and I folded this back. And when I folded this all the way back, I was able to see that I had folded it to where the tip of the whisker was tip to tip and my eyeballs were fairly matchy, okay? If you are doing anything with symmetry, where like a face, any of that, you really want to line those eyeballs up unless the print is meant to be awkward. And the reason I say that is because it will be noticeable on the front of your body, and you will not grab that shirt as much if you do not love how it is laid out. So really pay attention to your layout. So one thing I do, if I'm cutting out, like if I was to do a selfish sew, if I already had the shirt made, I would put the shirt on, kind of figure out where on my pattern I would need to start my print and go from there. If I have never made a shirt out of that pattern, I would look at pictures, I would look at the shape of the piece, the pattern piece I am using, and I would kind of judge from there. I would really try to think about placement. I don't want a ball on my belly. I don't want to accentuate my belly, my midsection. I have a mama gut. It's not big, but it's there. It's noticeable, and I just don't want people to question whether I'm carrying another child or not. So for me, I choose to really watch my placement in that respect. That being said, you know, certain panels you might not want an eyeball on each nipple. Sorry, it's kind of crude to say it that way, but that's the truth of it. Why go through all the work to have a shirt that you aren't going to wear because you're offended by it? So really watch your placement. Sometimes those placements are funny, and they're funny oopses, and you put the shirt on anyway and you don't care, and honestly I probably would most of the time. But I do try to avoid those mistakes also because I like to wear my clothes out and about. So I'm using a new pattern to me. It's a new designer. It's Jaylee Patterns. So far I'm in love. Her instructions seem really, from what I have read, are very clear. I really love how her drafting is. Her drafting is amazing, and to me that's nice because if you're making, like I'm making this for a friend, and if you're making multiple items, it's not going to look the same from one item to the next if you don't have a well drafted pattern. It might look different and can kind of be harder. So I like to have a drafted pattern. So here's my pattern. I'm laying it out. I'm going to really try to kind of hopefully keep it to where you guys, I'm going to be mindful. I'll go back over the video too. Keep it to where you can't see the exact pattern as I'm doing this. So bear with me because I don't want anybody to be able to take her pattern off of my little video on how I was cutting pattern out. So the top of my zero is here. The top of my neckline is here. This neckline comes up high. All the pictures I looked at, the neckline's sitting way, way up here on the guy. So I want to make sure that I keep that in mind, and I'm also throwing a neckband on this sucker. So I'm going to pull this pattern up. I'm going to pull it up probably to the 6. So my armpit is sitting right here. I kind of want my armpit, I know, to come kind of right about where that ear is. I know that's kind of specific, but that's just, it's how I want things. Actually, I want it to be a little bit above that ear. On that fox, because I don't want his belly being the highlight of the show, I guess. Kind of like what I was saying before. You just really want to watch that. So I'm going to lay that there. I'm really trying to watch pattern placement here as I do this. I know I'm going to have a neckband on here. So I'm just really trying to be mindful of all of that. I'm going to get my pattern placed out on here how I want it. I've already smoothed out my fabric. I've put my fabric down. I've made sure that my points are lined up. I've done all that. So now I'm putting pattern weights down. Now pattern weights are a great tool. Some people don't use them. I do. These are literally washers from the hardware store. In fact, I could use a few more and it would be fun to decorate them, and maybe one day I'll do that. But for now, just using the plain washers, and they work. So one thing I really watch for too when I've laid out my pattern and I've got it all laid out, I want to double check to make sure that my grain line is matching up. Oftentimes you will see somebody post on one of your sites, your pattern sites, or maybe you yourself will cut out a pattern and you will say, hey, my pattern front is not lining up to the back. And maybe you've cut this pattern out before and it lined up just fine and you're trying to figure out what the change is. Well, you probably cut off your grain line. So a lot of patterns will have a straight line with an arrow on each end, and that arrow on each end will say there'll be grain line on there. And so if you line a ruler up to each of those ends of that arrow, I mean, even if you don't have a long, just go from the end of one point and the end of the other point, and you go onto your fabric, you're going to see if you're on the grain line or not. I don't see one of those on here. I could just be missing it. They could have a different style to it. But I'm going to use this little kind of straight line I have going right here on this piece. I know it's a fairly straight line. And I'm just going to look, and as I can see, I'm not cutting across the grain as I come down. And that's what you want to avoid. You don't want to cut across the grain. If I was cutting across the grain, I would be going across multiple lines of grain where my end points would be ending in different areas. I want my end point and my grain line to run even. So if this is going to run off the fabric, I want it to follow the same line down when I'm doing that. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to look and see if it's doing the same. I don't want to be going across the lines, because when you start going across the lines, that's when you're going to have a mess up with your layout on your pattern, because it's going to stretch different. If you are working with a woven and you want to have a little bit of stretch, let's say you're making a headband or something, you're going to cut that woven on the bias, and the bias is going crossways from the grain. So especially with knit, that's already stretchy, but just in general with anything, anytime you cut off the grain, you misshape your pattern piece, and we don't want to do that. We want symmetry. Especially since I'm cutting on the fold, I want the right half and the left half to be equal. So I have it all cut out, or all lined up. I know where I want it. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm making sure, the other thing I want to make sure is I'm doing a raglan. I want to make sure that my zero, I should have done this before I did the grain line thing, but I didn't. And so I'm going to go back and do this. I want to make sure that my zero line lines up and is not going to be cutting into my shirt top. And I want to make sure that the given under there, which I don't see, is lined up and not cutting into my shirt top. But I don't see it coming out there, and I have it pretty symmetrical, so it should be fine. And the reason you want to do that is because you don't want to cut off the tip of the word. You don't want it going into your armpit all funky, you know, that sort of thing. So there's that. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and cut this pattern out now, and excuse the awkward camera angles. So as I go, I just kind of go along the edge here, and I'm going to follow my pattern all the way around, and I'm kind of pushing down a little bit. My rotary cutter is a bit dull, and I really do need to change the blades on this sucker. So I got the bottom cut off there. I'm going to come up and I'm going to do my neckband next. And as you can see, my pattern weights are doing a really good job of just keeping my pattern and my fabric even. I'm not getting any pulls anywhere, so this is going to cut out really nice. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to cut my pattern. And I really want to get kind of, you'll see me kind of fine tune this pattern. Your pattern cut really determines the shape of your what you're making. So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm just going through and I'm cutting it and just making sure. So I'm going to go right along the edge here. And this pattern's really nice in the fact that it's got marker points, and you can cut these two different ways. You can cut and just make a little tiny slit, or you can do the peak. I'm going to do the peak on this one because I didn't check to see exactly what my seam allowance was. It is not always smart with a new pattern maker, but that's okay. But basically those points help you line up your pieces. So I am probably, that's going to line up to my sleeve piece and make sure that I'm lining that up, and it actually makes it, it's kind of a pain to cut it out in the meantime, but it makes it a whole lot easier in the long run. So I like it when they have points like that because they make putting the pattern together a lot easier. There's another point right here, so I'm going to get to that. So I'm just going to go down, right down the edge of the pattern here, and I'm going to put my little tip here. Kind of got into my pattern a little bit there, but it should be fine. Oh, I got the whole thing there. Oops. To right. It's still there. It's still a noticeable notch. I'm going to pull this all the way down to the end here. Now, one thing I do, you saw me kind of pulling it back, and I was kind of being a little bit ruthless with it, but a lot of times if I'm pulling a fabric, especially if I'm working with like a Liverpool, I like to pull it out slightly and just follow with my blade as I'm pulling and get any of those little tiny pieces that are still cut there. Especially with Liverpool, if you pull one of the little lines with Liverpool, you're going to end up with a line going right across your fabric because you've pulled that thread, and it's going to cause like a snag on like that you'd see on like nylons or something like that. I mean, you can do the same thing with fabric. You can do it with brush poly, you can do it with cotton lycra. It's a lot easier to do with a Ponte or a Liverpool, but it's possible to do with all of it. So when you're pulling your piece off, you don't want to just grab your thing and rip it. You want to make sure you cut through that solidly so that you don't do that. So I have done this. I've laid it all out. I've cut it out. I'm just going to fine tune anything that I see that needs to be fine tuned before I pick it up, which I think I got most all of it. There's a little spot right here. I really try to make sure, like I said, that I'm right on that shape of my pattern, because that makes a difference, there's my neck, in how your pattern looks. So there is that. I've got this piece done. So the next thing I do, I love these Wonder Clips. I don't know if you guys have them or not, but they are my lifesaver. I use them a ton. So I always clip my center front of my shirt before I unfold my piece. I figure out where that's going to be. I put that on there. The reason I do that is because it's a whole lot easier to figure it out when it's folded in half. And if your seam allowances are correct and everything, those points will be the same when you go to put your neckband on. So I will clip it. If it is a pattern where I know I'm going to need the center front on the bottom of my shirt, I will clip it there too. This one I don't need that, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pull this pattern piece off here. And we're going to keep going here. So there's my pattern. It's all cut out. I'm going to open it up. It's going to look silly up against me, but I'm going to do it anyway, just because keep in mind it's for a guy and he's a lot bigger than I am. But here's his front part. And as you can see, if I pull this up to kind of a neck height, and if you can use your imagination a little bit, it's going to be sitting right where I want to on him, kind of right where I planned it out. And it should look pretty cool and snazzy with its sleeves and everything on. I'm super excited to get it sewn up and made for him. It's a super, super, super fun panel. And I really thank you guys all for watching. I tried to go as fast as I can, but I also want you guys to see some reality there. Keep in mind, when you're cutting out a panel, you might spend up to 30 minutes getting everything smooth, wrinkled, and everything right. But take that extra time, that extra 5 minutes or that extra 10 minutes you're taking really is going to make a difference on how your piece turns out. So I cannot stress enough, take the time, take the steps, cut your selvage off, lay your pattern out right, really watch your points, watch your piece, do it nice, and you're going to be a whole lot happier with the end result. So thank you guys for watching. And until next time, see you later.